Welcome, everyone. My name is Sarah Joseph, and I help people by empowering them with tools to strengthen relationships. Thank you for joining me tonight as part of the 6-week series that the school district on the Sunshine Coast is putting on for parents of secondary school students. Tonight, we're talking about co-creating routines and structure with our adolescents. So last week, we talked about the brain and our window of tolerance. And I just wanted to take a moment to remind you about that information. So the window of tolerance is really just our ability to handle and deal with stress. So often when we're in stressful times, we have a smaller window of tolerance. So I want you to imagine the window of tolerance. If you weren't here last week, I'll just give you a quick recap. Imagine your window of tolerance as being the space where you're able to deal with stress. So for instance, if you woke up in the morning and you're trying to get out of the house and your alarm didn't go off, so you woke up late, that's a stressful event. And you might find it frustrating and you might find it challenging, but you're able to deal with it. And then you're trying to get out of the house and you can't find your keys. That's another stressful event. And you're frustrated by it and you're challenged by it, but you're able to manage it, right? You're able to cope with those feelings. You're able to deal with it, find the keys, and get moving on with your day. And so that space, it shrinks as more stress gets loaded on. So as you're going through your day, you spill coffee on your white shirt right before a presentation. You get stuck in traffic on your way to a meeting, and then the things just keep happening, and so your window of tolerance is just shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. You're dealing with the stressful situations as they're happening, and you're managing and getting through your day, but your ability to cope with more stress is diminishing. At the end of the day, you get home, you walk through your door, and you trip over a pair of shoes that one of your kids didn't put on the shoe rack. And you completely lose it. Now, to your kids and your partner, it may seem like you've just lost it over a really small thing, a pair of shoes not being put away, right? That's not something that you would normally lose it over. However, because your window of tolerance has pretty much closed because of all the other stress that you were dealing with throughout the day, you couldn't handle the shoes, that bit of stress. Think of it as the straw that broke the camel's back, right? So that's what your window of tolerance basically is. Now, because of what's going on in the world right now, everybody's window of stress our window of tolerance has been decreased, right? It is smaller. So we are all having a smaller, a decreased ability for listening and for learning, decreased ability to deal with stress, decreased ability to deal with confrontation and hassles, right, as they come up. So you're probably witnessing more blow-ups happening in your house. Or shutdowns, right? People deal with stress in two different ways. Some of them blow up and move into that fight response, and some of them shut down and move into that flight response, right? So you're probably seeing more of this happening in your house. I know I'm seeing more of it happen in my house with myself and with my children. And I just want you to know that that is normal. Okay, especially right now. It is normal when we're dealing with stress to feel like we are losing it more often, like we don't have the patience that we normally do. Okay, so one of the reasons I wanted to talk about routines tonight and creating structure is because that is a really good way to help us keep our window of tolerance open. Okay, having routines makes it easier for us to deal with stressful events. That structure and that normacy of knowing what to expect next, knowing what is coming next, having that dependable consistency in our life really helps us cope with stress. It really helps us keep that window of tolerance open. It also is really helpful to just get things done, right? And it's easy right now for us to, and for our adolescents, to move into the why bother? I'll just stay in my pajamas all day and sleep in and watch TV or text friends all day mode, right? It's really easy to move into that. So this getting some structure and routine set up is a way that we can help our adolescents get things done and help us get things done. It often helps families feel like they're running smoother. That consistency of routines helps parents feel like we're doing a good job, but it also, you know, it feels good when you're able to check things off your to-do list. When you're productive in some way, it feels good. So it's not only going to feel good for us as parents, knowing that we're doing a good job because we're being productive and our kids are getting their schoolwork done or being productive in some way. It's going to help our kids feel good about themselves as well. As I said, it lowers stress and it often can help reduce disputes or conflict in our house. Okay. And we'll talk about this more as we get into why routines are good and how we're gonna create them with our kids. But basically, the way that it helps reduce conflict is that it allows the routine to become the boss instead of us as parents having to tell our kids what to do constantly. And it also just sets us up so we know what's coming, so we don't have to think about or make decisions about what needs to be done next. So for instance, if we know that Friday nights is pizza and movie night as a family, then nobody has to worry about what to cook on Friday nights or what we're doing on Friday nights. And so we don't have to make those decisions, which reduces our stress levels, but could also reduce that conflict about what we're going to do as a family, or if your adolescent is able to go out normally. Maybe not right now, but normally. You know what I'm talking about. So all good reasons to set up some routines. And of course, right now, we're out of our routine, right? We're out, we don't have that structure because we have had all this change, because kids aren't going to school and they're at home all day. So our routines have changed. That structure around getting up and getting out of the house and going to school and maybe doing some after school activities, and maybe having dinner together as a family, that has all changed. And so now we really need to create some new routines, establish some new structure in our households so that we all feel a bit more safe, basically, and less stressed. So routines are really good for adolescents because it helps them feel safe and secure and looked after, especially in times of stress, especially during times of change. Okay. It also can help them build skills and responsibilities like time management, and help them build healthy habits like brushing their teeth when they wake up, right? Washing their hands. Hopefully they have those down by now, but you never know. Well, we can also help them build some healthy habits around, working out on a regular basis, getting exercise, getting fresh air, and taking care of their brain health and their body health as well. It also can help us set body clocks. So for instance, adolescents often have a hard time with sleep. And so by setting a routine around bedtime, and this might sound like something we do for toddlers, but you know what? It's really helpful for adults and adolescents as well. When we set a routine around what bedtime looks like, shutting off our devices an hour before we're trying to fall asleep, things like that, it really helps set our body clock up and helps our body know when it's time to unwind. So, when we're on our devices, the screens, the blue light behind the backlit light makes our brains think that it's time to be awake, right? And so if we're able to set a routine where we're shutting down devices at least an hour before we're expecting to fall asleep, then we're able to help our clocks, our body clocks, recognize that it's time to fall asleep. Our brains send out a signal to the rest of our body that tells it it's time to fall asleep instead of it's time to be awake, right? And the last thing, the last reason why routines are really good for adolescents is because kids don't feel like they're being told what to do constantly. And I have to say, this is one of the number one things that adolescents complain to me about when I'm seeing them in a counseling session. They feel like they're being bossed around a lot. And of course, when you're moving into your teen years, you're trying to establish some autonomy, and kids are often pushing away from their parents and trying to control more of their own life, right? And so if we can help co-create some routines together where we're seeing that they're establishing and getting done the things that they need to get done throughout the day, then they can feel like they're in control of that, and we can not need to tell them what to do, right? And it's a win-win for everybody. So I don't know if you have seen this book. I'll pull it up again later, but here's my little picture of it, Brainstorm. Brainstorm, The Power and Purpose of the Teenage Brain by Dan Siegel is an amazing book that if you haven't read yet, you may want to pick up to read with your teen. It's meant for ages 12 to 24, and it's a great guide for the adolescent mind, for parents and for the teens to read. Dan Siegel is a neurobiologist who writes books for parents, and this book was written specifically for adolescents, and he's written it in basically to them. So it's just a really helpful way to understand what's going on in our adolescents' brains, and to understand how we can set them up for success, how we can keep their brain growing towards integration and healthy brain structures that keeps them flexible and learning and in more of a positive mind frame. So Dan talks about in this book, he suggests 7 daily activities that are scientifically proven to keep your body healthy, your mind strong, and your brain growing towards that integration. So the 7 things that he suggests incorporating into a routine for the day is time to focus, time to play, time in, which is his way of saying reflective time. So that might be meditation or just time to journal and think about how things are going in your life, sensations in your body, feelings, all that kind of stuff. Connecting time, and he really wants that to happen in person. That's really difficult right now for us to have connection time outside of our family or our households, but not impossible, right? And so helping our kids figure out ways to stay safe but still connect will be really helpful for them. Having downtime and physical time, and then sleep time, right? Again, sleep is really important. And one of the things that's interesting right now is that, you know, adolescents often have a hard time falling asleep. So they stay up late. And then because school starts so early, we often have this cycle of lack of sleep, which again, shrinks our window of tolerance. The beauty right now is that because of the pandemic, we are able to sleep in a little bit later. So we could shift the schedule a little bit if that's what works for your kids. If they're not more early birds, don't like to get up early, let them sleep in a little bit later, as long as they're still getting their schoolwork done and the other things that they need to get done during the day, right? Sleeping in doesn't necessarily mean being lazy or not getting done what needs to be done in the day. It could simply be, I need this set of sleep. And for adolescents, the recommended length of sleep is 8.5 to 9.5 hours per night. So if you recognize that your child is getting less than that, then you know that that is affecting their window of tolerance. And it's affecting their ability to focus, right? When your window of tolerance is shrinking, then your ability to learn and listen, cooperate, it is all reduced. Okay, so creating a routine with our kids that works for them and is going to create more success for them is the goal here, right? So before we talk about how we're going to do this, how we're going to co-create, let's talk about using some curiosity questions to do so. So when a child hears a command, so when we tell our kids what to do, a signal is sent to the brain that invites resistance. Now, I believe it was Gordon Neufeld who coined the phrase resistance reflex, and that's what we're talking about. The brain has a reflex that's very much like, you know, when you go to the doctor and you get your elbow hit with a little hammer and your arm shoots out, or your knee gets tapped and your leg shoots out. The resistance reflex is very much the same. When a command is heard, when somebody feels like they're being bossed, then we have this reflex to say, no, you're not the boss of me, or to have some resistance, some pushback against doing that thing. But when kids, I say children, but adolescents, adults too, when we hear respectful questions, a signal is sent to the brain to search for an answer. And so it is really helpful in the process of helping kids feel capable and to engage them in cooperation. So curiosity questions are questions that are not yes or no answers, that help children, help adolescents, help adults search for answers, right? So they help us engage that cooperation, help them learn how to think critically, feel more capable, because now we're not telling them what to do. They're finding the answers, they're figuring out what needs to get done, and it helps us draw forth their knowledge. So learning actually takes place when knowledge is drawn out instead of pushed in, right? So lecture styles don't often work, but when questions are asked, then our knowledge comes out, right? And that's when learning is really happening. So if we're able to ask kids, you know, what do you need to get accomplished this week for your math class? And then they search for the answer and tell us, then that's going to draw forth their knowledge, right? And it also helps us when we draw forth their knowledge, it helps us recognize what they know and we can then help them fill in gaps of what they don't know. So we want to ask these questions respectfully and then have conversations around them. So when we're asking these curiosity questions, we want to make sure firstly that we're both emotionally regulated, right? So that means that adults and our adolescents are not emotionally overwhelmed. This is when you're in that fight or flight response, when you're at your max of your window of tolerance, that is not the time to have these conversations, and it's not the time to use curiosity questions, because questions can confuse a mind, right? They confuse the brain that is already overwhelmed. So we want to make sure that everybody is in a calm state, that we're all regulated before we jump into these conversations. And then we can use curiosity questions, sincerely asking, so what's your plan for getting your work done this week? We're not trying to ask questions and get the right answer, right? When we do that, kids know. And it doesn't feel good because, right? It feels like your parents don't trust you. But kids know. It feels manipulative. And when they feel like that, then they push back still, right? So the curiosity questions don't work when you're trying to get the answer that you want. That's not the idea here. It's to truly be curious when you ask these questions, to find out what your child wants, to find out what they need, to find out what they know, okay? So when we're working on co-creating structure or co-creating routines together, what we're going to do is sit down and have a conversation about what we think the day should look like, right? And so you can open up that conversation with your child by just simply asking. So things like, so we're stuck at home and You know, routine has changed, and it's best to have a routine. What do you think yours should look like? Right? What are the things that you need to get done in a day? And how can we put them into an order that makes sense? Now, when we're talking about routines and structure, I'm not talking about a schedule, right? We don't have to be minute by minute creating a detailed schedule, but think of it more as a to-do list, right? And you know, sometimes when we think about what we did with our young kids, we would have a routine chart. Or if you're walking into an elementary school, you would see a list on the chalkboard or the whiteboard of what the day was going to look like, right? At preschools, at daycares, often in elementary school, it all has a list of what the day will look like. We're going to do this, and then have recess. Then we're going to do this subject and that subject, and then we're going to have lunch and recess, right? This is the same idea. When you think about yourself going to work, you know what you're going to do that day because you have a calendar, you have meetings scheduled, right? You know what work needs to get done, and you schedule time to do that. You might use a to-do list to figure out what needs to get done in your day, what errands need to be run, what things you need to buy, right? And those are all very helpful tools. In secondary school, kids have a schedule of classes, right? And that again is just another way of having a routine. So we're not necessarily talking about scheduling minute by minute, but just having a routine of like, what do we do throughout the day? And we already have routines of how we wake up and get ready to get out of the house. And although we're not leaving the house, it's a good practice to remain with that routine, because during stressful times, when we return to routines that we're used to, it brings relief to our body. It relieves anxiety, right? It's like leaning back on something you know. It's bringing comfort. So it's good to start your day with your normal routine of getting up and getting ready for your day. And then to go about setting up new schedules or new structures, routines for the rest of the day of what needs to get done, and how can we fit in some fun, some play, some connection time, some of those things that Dan Siegel talked about, right? So let's look at that again. So in our house, the way that we've kind of structured things is that we're waking up and we're trying to do some yoga together in the morning, some meditation to help start our day off good. I've been finding when we get to it, it works really well. And when we don't get to it, the day kind of falls apart. So I'm getting back on my yoga bandwagon tomorrow morning. So we've been getting up and doing yoga and getting ready for our day in the regular way that we do. Getting breakfast, getting showered, getting dressed, brushing teeth, all that kind of stuff. And then we're coming into our focus time of school. Our school started at 8:30, so that's what we're doing still here in our house. We're sitting down to do our schoolwork at 8:30 in the morning. And we do our focus time, and then there's time for play. So the kids have some free time, able to go outside to do whatever they want in that play time. We also have time for connection. So they usually do some screen time to connect with friends throughout the day. But then after supper, as a family, we usually have connection time. We play a board game, we go outside for a walk, we do something together as a family for a little bit. There's also part of our regular day is downtime, and our downtime usually looks like reading. Funny enough, that's what the picture says too. So we have some reading time, and we usually have in the afternoon some physical time. Now, I just kind of jumped around on our day because I was looking at the picture, but you can see how you can kind of fit all of that stuff in, right? On a regular basis, right? You start with your ours is time in, our yoga is the time in, right? So we get out of bed and we start with our time in of meditation or yoga, and then we move into getting ready for our day, and then focus time, play, and then we have in the afternoon our physical time, and then we have dinner with the family and connection time with the family, and then we have our downtime of reading before we go to bed. So you can see how we've just kind of made that the routine, And the kids we put it on a whiteboard so everybody kind of sees what the day can look like. And we also have time in there for contributions, so for chores. Um, and and that can happen like anytime during the afternoon. So the play and the contributions kind of meld together sometimes. They go off and they come back. But anyways, that's just how it's working in my household, and it doesn't mean that that's how it has to happen in your household. It's just one example of what it could look like, right? And again, it's not necessarily about creating this really firm structure. It's about just having a sense of what's coming next, having a sense of what needs to get done in the day, and finding ways to move through those list of things in a way that works for everybody in your family, right? And so I hope you found that helpful. Really what we're trying to do is just work with our kids, right? The idea is to really help our adolescents figure out what the structure or the routine that they need to get their schoolwork done, to be able to do all those things, connect, play, rest throughout their days every day. And to do it in a way that is helping them. We're co-creating with them. We're not telling them what to do. We're asking them, we're getting their buy-in because they're part of the process. They're part of setting it up, right? It's going to be helpful for them. And as they start doing it and feeling the routine, and feeling what it feels like to be part of that process of creating it and then following through with it, and the help of the stress relief that comes from having the routine, then you'll see that they'll want to continue with it. It feels really good when you're able to follow your routine and accomplish what's on your list. It feels good when you're productive in that way. And so when we're able to help kids feel that way, then they'll continue on. And that's a really good life skill to have. So I hope you found this helpful. And I hope that you'll join us next week. Next week, we're going to talk about gaining cooperation through connection and contribution. And we touched on a little bit of contribution today, but we'll talk a lot more about contributing to the household, chores, and more next week.